August 7th, 1972. A 16-year-old girl vanishes in the quiet suburbs of New Jersey. 6 weeks later, her body is found on a rocky cliff locals call the Devil's Teeth. Her remains are surrounded by rumors of occult symbols, whispers of ritual sacrifice, and silence from authorities who never found a cause of death. 50 years later, her case remains unsolved. This is the haunting story of Jeannette DePalma. Chapter 1. Springfield, New Jersey in the 70s. Springfield, New Jersey, wasn't the sort of town where people expected tragedy. Nestled in Union County, it was a modest suburban community: churches, corner stores, kids riding bikes on cul-de-sacs. But beneath the ordinary surface, tensions simmered. It was the early 70s. The United States was in turmoil. The Vietnam War was nearing its bloody end. Protests filled the streets, and cultural shifts left parents fearful of losing control of their children. In towns like Springfield, that fear manifested in very specific ways. The rise of drug culture among teens, anxieties over occult activity, fueled by sensational media, and an ever-present fear of crime creeping into quiet suburban neighborhoods. Churches played a central role in Springfield's life. Many families were deeply religious, with youth groups and Bible studies forming the backbone of teenage social life. But that religious backdrop also meant that rumors of the occult carried extra weight. By the early 70s, whispers of Satanism, witchcraft, and secret cults were spreading through suburban America. Almost any unexplained tragedy was viewed through this lens, and Springfield would soon become one of the epicenters of that hysteria. Chapter 2. Who was Jeannette DePalma? At the heart of this story is a 16-year-old girl, Jeannette DePalma. She lived with her parents and siblings in Springfield. To those who knew her, Jeannette was a bright, warm young woman who attended church regularly. Her faith was important to her, and she was active in her local congregation. But as with many teenagers, her life had layers. Some described her as a good Christian girl. Others whispered she was rebellious, experimenting with the counterculture of the time. Classmates remembered her as friendly, approachable, but private. She wasn't a troublemaker, but she wasn't immune to curiosity either. The early 70s were a confusing time for teenagers with peer pressure, shifting norms, and temptations everywhere. Accounts about Jeannette's life often conflicted. Some insisted she was deeply religious, uninterested in drugs or alcohol. Others claimed she had been hanging out with friends who experimented with both. Like many victims of unsolved cases, Jeannette's identity became blurred in the aftermath. People projected onto her what fit their theories: angel, sinner, innocent, reckless. The truth was likely somewhere in between. What we know for certain is this: on August 7th, 1972, Jeannette left home, and she never came back. Chapter 3. The Disappearance, August 7, 1972. It was a warm summer day when Jeannette told her family she was going to visit a friend. She left her home in Springfield around noon, but Jeannette never arrived. When she didn't return by evening, her family grew concerned. At first, some thought she might have gone off on her own, a common assumption in the 70s, when police often dismissed missing teens as runaways. But her parents insisted something was wrong. Jeannette wasn't the type to vanish without explanation. She was close with her family, deeply rooted in her church, and had no history of running away. Days turned into weeks. The Springfield police searched, but with few leads, the trail grew cold. Posters went up, family and church members organized searches, but no trace of Jeannette was found. Her disappearance left a void in the community. Rumors began swirling almost immediately. Had she been abducted? Did she run away? Was there something darker at play? For 6 weeks, her family lived in limbo. And then, everything changed. Chapter 4. The Discovery at Hudai Quarry. On September 19, 1972, a local resident's dog returned home carrying a bone. At first, the owner thought little of it. but upon closer inspection, the bone looked human. Alarmed, the resident contacted the police. Authorities traced the dog's path back to an abandoned section of the Hudaye Quarry, a vast and rocky area in Springfield. The quarry was a notorious hangout spot for local teenagers, secluded, dangerous, and steeped in urban legends. It was there, on a cliff locals called the Devil's Teeth, that police found the decomposed body of Jeannette DePalma. Her remains were lying on a large rock formation. Surrounding her, according to some accounts, were branches and stones arranged in odd patterns. Some claimed crosses had been formed around her body. Others insisted occult symbols were carved nearby. But here's the catch. None of these details were ever officially confirmed by police. The official reports make no mention of ritualistic symbols. Yet, the rumors spread like wildfire, cementing Jeannette's death as part of the growing narrative of satanic murders in suburban America. The discovery shocked Springfield. Parents warned their children not to wander. Church leaders denounced what they believed was satanic activity in their midst. And Jeannette's family, desperate for answers, had to contend not only with grief, but with the storm of rumor that would follow them for decades. Chapter 5. The Rumors. Satanic Panic. To understand what happened next, we need to step into the world of the 1970 Satanic Panic. Though it would peak in the 80s, the seeds were already planted in the early 70s. Books, television, and films fueled public fear of witchcraft and devil worship. Rosemary's Baby 1968 and The Exorcist 1973 etched occult imagery into mainstream consciousness. In this climate, Jeannette's death seemed almost tailor-made for hysteria. Local newspapers began reporting on witchcraft murder theories. Neighbors whispered that covens operated in the quarry, performing rituals in the dead of night. Some claimed animals had been sacrificed there before. The story took on a life of its own. Jeannette wasn't just murdered, she was sacrificed. Her body wasn't just found in the woods, it was staged for ritual. And Springfield wasn't just a quiet town anymore, it was a place haunted by Satan himself. But how much of this was fact, and how much was myth? Decades later, the magazine Weird NJ would revisit the case, interviewing locals and publishing articles that reignited public interest. They reported stories of crosses made of sticks, circles of stones, and whispers of a coven operating in the woods. Yet skeptics point out that police never confirmed any occult symbols at the scene. The most likely explanation? That rumors filled the void left by a lack of answers, and in a deeply religious community, the occult became the explanation that stuck. Still, the rumor of witchcraft became permanently tied to Jeannette's story. And once that idea took root, it was nearly impossible to shake. Chapter 6. Evidence. Autopsy. When investigators examined Jeannette's body, the results only deepened the mystery. The remains were badly decomposed. 6 weeks in the late summer heat had erased many physical clues. Still, the medical examiner's report and subsequent FBI lab tests painted a strange picture. There were no clear signs of trauma. No stab wounds. No gunshot wounds. No broken bones. Toxicology tests were inconclusive. The FBI found no trace of drugs or alcohol in her system. For a town where rumors swirled about drug use among teens, this result was surprising. But the real blow came when the ME declared the cause of death undetermined. In other words, they couldn't say how Jeannette had died. That ambiguity left the door wide open for speculation. If the medical examiner couldn't find a cause, then rumors of occult rituals or poisonings seemed more believable to frightened locals. Investigators tried to trace Jeannette's movements before her disappearance. Who had she seen that day? Where had she gone? But no one came forward with definitive answers. Without physical evidence or reliable witnesses, the investigation stalled. For Jeannette's family, that was perhaps the hardest part. Not only had they lost their daughter, but they had no answers for how or why it had happened. Chapter 7. Theories. Deep dive. With no cause of death and little evidence, the case was left wide open for speculation. Over the years, several theories emerged, some reasonable, others sensational. 1. The occult sacrifice theory. This was the most widely publicized explanation. Locals claimed her body had been surrounded by crosses made of sticks or strange rock patterns. Some whispered that a Bible had been placed near her remains. Others said there were symbols carved into nearby stones. But as we've noted, none of this was in the official reports. No photographs exist. No police statements confirm it. Still, the rumor persisted, partly because it fit neatly into the rising fears of the time. In the 70s, the idea of teenage witches and satanic cults was a cultural obsession. Jeannette's church-going background made the rumor even more powerful. The good Christian girl taken by dark forces. The reality? It's entirely possible that the symbols were nothing more than fallen branches and rocks, misinterpreted by frightened residents. 2. The drug overdose theory. Another common theory is that Jeannette died of a drug overdose. In the early 1970s, teenage drug use was rising across suburban America. Heroin and barbiturates were particularly prevalent. Parents and police alike feared that good kids were being lured into dangerous circles. Some suggested that Jeannette may have tried drugs for the first time, perhaps with friends, and accidentally overdosed. In a panic, the others may have staged her body in the quarry to avoid being caught. This theory has weight because authorities never released all toxicology results. While the FBI reported no trace of drugs, the decomposition may have obscured results. Still, without evidence, it remains speculation. 3. Someone she knew. A third theory suggests Jeannette was killed intentionally or accidentally by someone she trusted. Teenagers in Springfield remembered whispers of a boyfriend. Others spoke of older men who had taken an interest in her. Could a secret relationship have turned deadly? Alternatively, did someone in her circle want to silence her? Jeannette's strong church ties complicated this theory. Some suggested she may have been involved in something frowned upon by her religious community, and someone close to her took drastic measures. But again, without hard evidence, it remains conjecture. 4. A transient suspect. The Hudai Quarry was a known hangout for more than just local kids. Transients, drifters, and criminals sometimes passed through. Could Jeannette have stumbled upon the wrong person at the wrong time? This theory aligns with her body being found in such a secluded area. The quarry was dangerous, easy to hide in, and rarely patrolled. But with no witnesses and no DNA evidence at the time, investigators had nothing to pursue. 5. The serial killer connection. Richard Cottingham. Perhaps the most chilling theory is that Jeannette may have fallen victim to a serial killer. Richard Cottingham, known as the Torso Killer, was active in New Jersey in the early 1970s. He murdered multiple women, often staging their bodies in horrifying ways. In later interviews, Cottingham boasted of killing dozens, far more than the murders officially linked to him. Some investigators and true crime writers have speculated that Jeannette may have been one of his victims. Her age, location, and the strange staging of her body seemed to fit his pattern. But Cottingham has never been officially tied to her case. Like so much else in this mystery, the link is circumstantial at best. Chapter 8. Aftermath. Legacy. In the months following Jeannette's death, Springfield tried to move on, but the case left scars. Her family grieved in private. They rarely spoke publicly about her, avoiding the media circus that surrounded the rumors of witchcraft. In town, the story became legend. Parents warned their children about venturing near the quarry. Teenagers dared each other to visit the Devil's Teeth late at night. Over time, Jeannette's death became less a police case and more a ghost story. The name Jeannette DePalma was whispered like a curse, a reminder of danger, of evil, of the fragility of life in a small town. Decades later, her story resurfaced thanks to the magazine Weird NJ writers, interviewed locals, collected oral histories, and published accounts that reignited the theory of occult sacrifice. To some, this kept Jeannette's memory alive. To others, it reduced her life to a sensational myth. Chapter 9. Modern Investigations. Advocacy. Today, Jeannette's case is still technically open. The Union County Homicide Task Force has reviewed it in recent years. While they haven't made public announcements, the case file remains active. Advocates continue to push for DNA testing of evidence collected at the time. Modern forensic science could potentially reveal new leads from hair, clothing, or trace evidence overlooked in the 70s. In 2024, Weird NJ revisited the case once more, publishing photos of the quarry and analyzing claims of ritual symbols. Their conclusion? That the occult angle was likely exaggerated. No solid evidence tied Jeannette's death to witchcraft. Instead, her case stands as an example of how fear and rumor can overshadow fact. But for her family, and for those who still seek justice, the hope remains that one day, forensic science will answer the question the medical examiner could not. How did Jeannette DePalma die? Chapter 10. Wider context. Jeannette's story doesn't exist in a vacuum. Throughout the 70s and 80s, America was gripped by cases labeled as occult murders. Many were later debunked as misunderstandings, accidents, or unrelated crimes. The most famous was the case of Arliss Perry, a young woman murdered in 1974 inside Stanford University's chapel. Her death was long rumored to be satanic in nature, though it was later solved and found to be the work of a disturbed individual. The comparison is striking. Both Perry and DePalma were young, religious women whose deaths became entangled with occult rumor. These cases reveal something uncomfortable about human nature. When we face tragedy without explanation, we often create myths to fill the void. For Springfield, that myth was witchcraft. For Jeannette, it meant her memory became entwined with the satanic panic overshadowing her life and her humanity. 50 years later, the mystery of Jeannette DePalma remains unsolved. Was she the victim of a cult, an overdose, a crime of passion, or a serial killer hiding in plain sight? No one knows. What we do know is that a 16-year-old girl left home one August afternoon and never came back. Her story reminds us not only of the fragility of life, but of the dangers of rumor, hysteria, and fear. Until the truth is uncovered, the legend of Jeannette DePalma will remain one of New Jersey's most haunting mysteries.